In this slideshow and in this unit, we're talking about film that is a little bit different from what we typically see at the theater, at least at the big mainstream cinemaplex like the Century Theater. And that is, we're talking about art cinema and the avant-garde, which are actually quite different things, but both of them seek to do things other than mainstream Hollywood entertainment. At the same time, they're in those attempts, they end up influencing mainstream entertainment film. So the question then ultimately arises: how independent is art cinema and avant-garde from Hollywood entertainment? Because Hollywood so often appropriates from art cinema and from the avant-garde, and therefore the avant-garde is always continually pushing and innovating. So the term art cinema differs in that it aims for a niche audience, a particular small audience. It doesn't seek to appeal to as many people as possible. And for that reason, it is usually a smaller independent production and has a much lower budget. And so, because it has a lower budget, that means it can't rely on big stars, big effects, and things of that nature, and has to make up for its limitations by talking and focusing on different kinds of stories and telling them in different ways. That is, offering people something they can't get in the mainstream big budget film. So art cinema typically has different subject matter and often has different formal strategies than we see in mainstream cinema. And because of that, it can kind of push and innovate and do things that mainstream cinema can't, because it's not trying to make everyone happy. Having said that, as I've said, Hollywood constantly appropriates from art cinema, whether it's the people who make art films or the strategies that they employ in them. Hollywood constantly appropriates from them, even if it doesn't adopt all their strategies, or not everyone who makes those films ultimately becomes a big Hollywood filmmaker. And honestly, that is not the goal for most people who work in art cinema. They're more interested in being innovative and telling stories in unique ways than they are, making the next big budget, mega successful blockbuster. So in this slideshow, this particular slide right now, you're seeing a picture of Jean-Luc Godard, who is probably the most famous art cinema director of all time. He's still making films. French director who became famous in 1959, 1960 as part of what's called the French New Wave. And I'm going to show you a brief clip from his first film, Breathless. And in it, you're going to see some of what we're talking about in terms of just doing things differently in a way that is explicitly about actually breaking some of those rules that we just learned about in our editing unit, about continuity and editing and so forth. So I'm going to let this scene play for you a little bit, and I'll just talk about it. So this is from Breathless, and as you can see, we have this young woman riding in a car, and she's talking. And if you watch closely, you're going to see what are called jump cuts. And that means that we have cuts between shots where the camera is in the same position and it's not moving to a different position to show the character in a way that minimizes discontinuity. In fact, the point here is discontinuity. So you can see, even though you can't hear, you see the subtitles that we have, the character who is actually driving the car talking. Meanwhile, these shots of the head of this woman will jump. Right, so we're watching, and then we'll see that we're somewhere else. All right, and this is our first other shot that we've gotten. So this is intentional. This isn't just bad editing. This isn't someone who just doesn't know what they're doing. The attempt is to make something different, a different kind of cinema, something that learns from but distinguishes itself explicitly from that cinema that has all the resources and has a very refined look. We're supposed to notice the edits in a film like this. That's the point. So, moving on. There you go. There's another quick cut. To talk about the avant-garde. Now, the avant-garde is something different from art cinema, because avant-garde film really very rarely ever makes it into movie theaters or someplace like Netflix. Avant-garde film is often very short or very long, and it's to the extreme even in terms of just trying to be innovative. So avant-garde is a term that comes from art history. and all kinds of forms of art. And of course, that term itself means advanced garde. And the idea is that the avant-garde is explicitly experimental. The point is to be pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable. Pushing the boundaries, breaking the boundaries. And of course, that means that you always have to keep pushing because those boundaries are always going to shift. So avant-garde film is really, in a lot of ways, not just an alternative the way art cinema is, but very much defining itself against ordinary mainstream culture. What those things are that mainstream film does, avant-garde film is going to try to do the opposite. Remove the normal kinds of pleasures even that we're used to seeing or of mainstream film. At the same time, even avant-garde film gets appropriated in particular ways by mainstream film and mainstream culture. Again, whether it's the style of the film themselves, the form that they take, or even the people that make them. Even in the most radical avant-garde film, that has influenced Hollywood in terms of things like, if you think of when you're watching film, some of the most formally innovative sequences are often the opening sequences, right? The opening credits, because at that point you're not really trying to maintain any kind of continuity or keep people's attention. So there's a lot more freedom sometimes in credits to innovate. Okay, so I'm going to again show you here a film. This is a film called Mothlight, and I've got a separate link for you in the unit. But this film is made not by shooting through a camera, but by taping, attaching wings from moths as well as little pieces of grass and things like that to the film itself and then exposing the film. So what you're seeing, again, was not shot with a camera. And this is one of the most famous avant-garde films made by Stan Brakhage. I'm going to show you something else of his that's very different here in a second. But you can see, when you're watching something like this, of course, the experience of watching the film is entirely different from what we're used to. It's not about a story being told even. It's about the form and the different things that you can do with the form. And once you get over how different something is initially, and you just take it on its own as itself, rather than trying to make sense of it in the ways you're used to, you start to get different pleasures and enjoyment out of watching something like this. You start to see patterns or the light and the textures that are speeding by you so fast, and you start to appreciate changes in colors. Or I don't know what it is that you see when you watch this, but that's what I see. And this is what the avant-garde is about, taking something that we think we know how it works and turning it into something new. So, I'm going to stop this film right now. I'm going to stop this lecture right now, and if you want, you can go and you can watch the rest of this film without having to listen to me talk, and then see what you think about it.